recycled or be cycled at all our schools to manage the humidity level. And of course, that's at a significant cost savings. We are using our contract vendors for services such as roofing, landscaping, HVAC, fencing, and fire alarms. All that work continues. Our M&PO staff, by and large, have been working from home beginning March 30th. They're on a standby basis and will perform work as needed. And also, we've had several emergencies throughout the district, and so we're still protecting our buildings and servicing our buildings. We're using the school closure time to work on compliance issues, fire life safety issues, and do some of our backflow testing. So great job by our M&PO employees. Environmental and conservation services, they have been remarkable. They have communicated with federal, state, and local agencies on the status of the pandemic and protocols for response. Paul Strauss has been leading that effort as the director of the department, and he's been everywhere at once. So kudos to Paul for all his wonderful work in helping us get through this. They have assisted with the coordination of COVID-19 supply distribution for the district, managed contracts for the sanitation of schools that had possible infection or contamination, including cleanliness testing upon completion. And then they continue to monitor our indoor air quality work to ensure that all our schools remain ready to reopen. Next slide, please. Advancing construction projects. So we have 4 major construction projects ongoing, 24 facility renewal projects, 19 minor projects, and 77 security projects that we have moved forward. And so some of that includes project planning, submitting plans, and permitting. And we're working remotely with our professional consultants. Contract execution continues electronically, and we've completed 135 payments within the last 3 weeks, and I have more to sign to move those forward also. Our building department is continuing construction, our CSIRs, and fire safety inspections. Next slide. Transportation was deployed to support the work. So our drivers have been all over the place in helping the district. I want to applaud them and thank them for their dedication to our district. They have been assisting in transporting food supplies as needed, organizing volunteers for feeding sites, and in many cases, volunteering themselves. They completed sanitizing all our buses following school closure. And then they repaired a lot of buses and did perform maintenance on many of our buses. So I want to thank them for their effort in doing that. And then in addition, they're making sure that our buses are able to start when we eventually start school. So we're cranking the buses at least weekly. So thank you to all of our transportation folks and the job well done. Next slide, please. Safety and security of our personnel and facilities. Our school police have been remarkable in effectively managing the COVID-19 pandemic. School police has developed a comprehensive incident action plan for each operational period. Situational summaries and safety briefings, operational overviews, and planned objectives, and they're managing the assignment rosters and criteria for field and administrative personnel. Internally and externally, we continue to participate in many video and telephone meetings to ensure cooperation and consistency with emergency operations planning and implementation at all levels. Next slide, please. Through the Tactical Operations Center, or TOC, and the police dispatch, we have coordinated COVID-19 response activity with our district partners, various governmental entities, and other key stakeholders. District personnel, we established implemented training and safety protocols for our personnel and facilities to include improved screening and enhanced access control. In addition to providing traditional police services, they've adapted to the new demands associated with the distribution of technology and remote learning issues. Next slide. Along with patrolling and responding to calls throughout the district, school police has ensured the safety and secure distribution of food and technology. School police has adapted to and facilitated shifting demands for facility access from all district and staff and vendors. So they've been everywhere at once, and I want to thank all the brave and wonderful officers for all the work they have done. So so if there are any questions at this time, please feel free. I just want to thank my whole division because they have been superheroes throughout this whole COVID-19 experience and just have kept themselves upbeat and motivated. And so I just really, my heart goes out to all these wonderful people, and I am just so very proud of them. So I'll take questions at this time.
Mrs. Paul, I want to ask you a question. Quite a few parents have asked if the district has the needed supplies to sanitize the buses and the classrooms when we eventually start the schools, when we eventually start school up again, because all of us are trying to find, you can't find Lysol in the stores or basically anything else that supposedly kills the virus. So do we have adequate supplies to make sure that everything is clean and disinfected? Are we using anything special to disinfect the schools? And is there any plans to use an outside company that specializes in disinfecting properties before school starts to go into our schools and help us out with that?
So the answer is yes. We have adequate supplies. Matter of fact, our supplier is bursting at the seams because we haven't taken delivery of some of our summer stock. So yes, we do. We have sanitized, as I said, our custodians did a phenomenal job in doing that. We also have contracts in place that if we need to bring in an outside firm for special circumstances, we have that ability to do that. Again, it's been a moving situation, but we'll be ready to start school.
Thank you. First, Ms. Brill, and then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Barbieri. And along the same track as Mr. Barbieri's question, the biggest concern of the people I'm talking to in my district right now about going back is, are we going to make sure that all the schools have an adequate supply of antibacterial soaps and also paper towels, because that's been something that's been lacking. And we want to make sure that we have them in classrooms where we're able to, as well as in the bathrooms. And then the parents were also asking me whether their children could carry antibacterial stuff, in their pockets. So that's another question for you.
Our purchasing department has been remarkable in getting us the supplies we need. So I am confident that we'll have everything we need to start school.
Ms. Berg had a follow-up. Go ahead.
And just as a follow-up, what about allowing them to carry the antibacterial gels and stuff in their pockets? Is that something that we can permit?
I see no reason why we wouldn't, but again, that's something that we have a work group that's forming to talk about what the start of school looks like for us, and trying to map out all of those things that we need to take into consideration. So yes, we'll have hand sanitizer, antibacterial soap in the restrooms and so forth. And we'll make every effort to keep our staff and our students safe.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Andrews, and then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Mrs. Paul and the operations group. Many of those workers in your department are essential. So, I was so happy to see that the academies were able to give some of the masks to our healthcare providers. That was great. But I just want to make sure that we have enough personal protection equipment for our essential workers, and certainly looking at masks and protection for those. Many of them haven't stopped. They're still out there working. So can you give me the status? I know we started slow with just a few masks. Where are we now And are we fully equipped to take care of all of the people?
We are, and again, I want to thank our purchasing department for reaching out and getting us the masks and so forth that we need, and the gloves and so forth. They've been outstanding, Mike Burke and Darcy, and just basically getting us whatever we need. So yes, we do.
Mrs. Andrews, you need to turn your microphone off. I'm sorry. Mrs. Bass turns them off when you have a follow-up question. Turn off your microphone until you're ready for your follow-up question. If you get feedback, you don't do that.
All right. Well, the other question would be the feeding sites. I hear you say we're going down to one. So I just want to know how that works, who selected that one feeding site. I'm really concerned about the feeding sites.
Well, so we're providing meals like we've always done it, but we'll use Monday through Thursday to prep the meals and then provide the meals on Thursday. What has happened is, because we have such a huge volume, we requested refrigerated trucks from the state, and we were waiting for those to arrive. So again, we're trying to limit the contact that our personnel has with the people coming through. And so we feel that by doing this, it still feeds the community, but also protects our employees.
And Mr. Barbier, if you don't mind me jumping in, we're not reducing it to one feeding site, it's one feeding day. So we may actually open more sites in order to accommodate that much food being distributed at one time. So we're not going to one site for the whole district. It's just one day, and we'll hand out a week's worth of food.
And part of that planning also is getting ready for our summer feeding sites and expanding the summer or the program and feeding sites. So all of that work is happening now.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So first, I just want to talk about the antibacterial soap for a second. So please make sure that the concerned parents realize that the pandemic is a virus. Antibacterial soap is not going to do anything. Nothing more than regular soap, right? But also, I would suggest that since we're really all afraid of multiple different things, that maybe we ask one of our partners or school health advisory committee to weigh in on antibacterial soap in the schools. Some of the chemicals that have been used in antibacterial soaps in the past actually present a danger. I'm not sure if all of that is off the market. And there's also still some question about the overuse of other forms of antibacterial soap. And so before we go head first into saying we want to have a lot of antibacterial soap, I think we just need to weigh in on that. Like, lots of soap, yes. But the antibacterial part, I have some questions about. But now to the feeding program. So when we cut back to 1 day a week, how many meals per student are we talking about?
So right now it would be 2 meals per day for 6 days. So that's
12
meals.
And so what about any food for the family? Are we partnering still with the other agencies to feed family members?
So we're still working on that plan. That is kind of the direction we want to continue to go. One of the challenges we've had is them having enough volunteers to support their site, but we're still working through that. And, definitely want to thank them for what they've been able to do to help our community.
And my last question at this time is, I was curious to see specific churches that you were working with, looks like specifically in Jupiter. Was that because, was that to fill a void, or because I know a number of churches would raise their hand and say that they want to partner.
I believe those are the ones that reached out to us, and we were able to support it. But again, we've had so much outreach in the form of people and companies donating masks and shields to our food service personnel, coordinated through Ms. Brill. Thank you very much. And so we've just had so much outreach, and it's just astonishing, how much people need at this point. And we're just trying to facilitate whatever we can to ease some of the burden. So again, I want to thank the community for all the great work they've done and helped us through this crisis.
Can I sneak in one more question? When we move to these, this 1 day a week, are we still doing, well, I think we were doing some fresh fruits and vegetables. Are we still doing fresh fruits and vegetables? Are we doing those military rations?
MREs, no ma'am. We're doing, at every opportunity, we're going to do fresh fruits and vegetables. I've lived on MREs, and I would not do that to anyone. So,
okay, thank you.
Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, I just, something that sparked something in my mind. Dr. Robinson and I had an interesting conversation about a month ago about thermometers. And so what I think, I heard her say something, and I want to make sure that we do get access to the health professionals, because when you think about coming back to school, we may have to have a large supply of thermometers on here. Like if you start paying attention to the rest of the world, masks. And so I think for the board, and obviously Mike Burke, who's trying to juggle all these dollars, but I think I would love to get some sort of real health professional guidance, because if we have to get in line to order massive amounts of masks for our kids, or thermometers, we really need to start getting clear professional guidance on that now, because I'm sure once the orders start going in and you think about the entire country, it's going to be pretty massive. So I really, if Dr. Robinson or other board members, and we'll reach out on our own, can find a group to help us think about getting back to school from a realistic standpoint, and those sort of medical supplies we may need to order in bulk. So it's just something I'm throwing out to the board for consideration.
Thank you. I've got a question for you, Mrs. Paul. Yesterday I spoke with the chamber. Boca Chamber asked me to do one of their virtual meetings, and one of the questions came up and I didn't know the answer to. Where are we getting all the food? Is it we have the money to buy this food? Is it being given to us by the federal government for distribution, by the state government? Where is all the food coming from?
It's our normal procurement that we do to feed during the year and stuff. So we just place our orders, and the delivery chain hasn't been interrupted, so they continue. So we order literally every week based on what we predict and what we forecast in terms of the number of meals. So it's just through our normal procurement chain.
All right, thank you. I know Mr. Manuel has a question, but I want to ask you one more question first. And probably Mrs. Rico is going to have to chime in on this one. So I know kids were bringing alcohol to school with them, not the kind you drink, but the rubbing alcohol to clean and their parents were given those alcohol swabs and things. Are we at all concerned about violating the law? I mean, we need to make sure that they can do that, but there's got to be some changes in state law to allow kids to bring those kind of things to school starting in the fall. Then we need to be working with our legislators to approve those kind of things if they currently violate state law to bring those kind of chemicals onto school sites. So can you give us any input on that now or come back to us later, Mrs. Rico?
Thank you. And this is exactly the type of thing that I believe Mr. Oswald and others have referred to in terms of these working groups. There are a number of questions, both for the phase one, the current situation and reacting and embedding these practices and processes. And there's also a current working group looking at the future actions and activities. So all of these questions will be sifted through, and we'll look at what's compliant, what isn't, what needs a new policy, what might need legislative action for a legislative ask. So we will definitely be taking all those into consideration.
All right, thank you. Mr. Manuel, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Board members, if you put your hand up, watch my face. If I shake my head, I got you. If I don't, I'm looking at the PowerPoint myself, so I might miss you. So make sure you get some reaction from me so I know that so you don't holler at me later. I know Mrs. McQuinn usually sits at the other end of the dais, and I'm always missing her. But now, Mrs. McQuinn, I got to tell you, you're right in the center of my screen, so I can't miss your smiling face. So we're in good shape. Does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. At this time, I will now turn it over to our wonderful Mike Burke, who we will be leaning on a lot over the next year. So, Mike, you can take it away.
Yes, good afternoon. It's great to see you all. The Finance and IT Division has adapted well to this telework environment. Fortunately, the investments that the board has made over the years in our business systems and technology like PeopleSoft and our SIS and our district portal, they're really paying huge dividends now to make this really possible. Just to give you a feel for the level of productivity going on, I wanted to share some key performance indicators. I think that really tell the story. Our accounts payable team in accounting has paid over 11,000 invoices totaling $57.6 million. That is actually higher than what we've done during the same period of time last year. We've had 2 successful payrolls done remotely, both on April 3rd and April 17th, where we paid over 23,000 employees a payroll of $60 million each, roughly. I'm sure you're all aware, unfortunately, with this kind of unexpected closure of our school facilities, we had a huge volume of canceled trips and events that parents had already paid for students. And so there's a big effort going on now to refund our community. And the schools play a role in that with their treasurer and the principal and the teachers that may have sponsored those events. But we have a group of 7 people that work in our county department that support the school internal accounts. They're right in the middle of that. They've fielded over 13,000 emails. They've helped process 5,700 refunds, and this number is dated. We continue to do more each day. That totaled 1.2 million. We're working this week with extended learning and the school-age child care directors to issue about 2,000 more refunds for the after-school care program. So very busy again. Our purchasing department has had to switch to this same type of virtual format to negotiate contracts, to hold ITNs. And when you look at your agenda for April 29th, there's over 80 agenda items, a lot of them from purchasing. You're going to see a lot of important construction contracts. And I think that just really tells the story of how hard purchasing is working. I've heard the term hero used multiple times today. I've got to say our IT people are heroes in themselves. They've really pitched in, and I'm really proud of the work they've done to support our academic team with the digital learning effort. And our educational technology team who was under the academic team has been exceptional as well. But the IT group, we were handing out over 10,000 computers to our staff and our teachers right before we closed our doors because we knew we were going to have to be ready for this. And then they've also been a part of that, getting the devices in students' hands, and we're up to over 65,000 now. There is ongoing distribution throughout the month of April that will continue. And one of the other things we're dealing with is the repair of these devices. The last time I checked, we had repaired over 300 devices or replaced them because the device we sent home may have developed an issue or the family encountered a problem. So that's being taken care of. We ramped up our call center. We were getting a huge volume of calls for IT technical support and help. And we were able to kind of level that workload and bring in more people to help and manage through that. They were returning voicemail messages to make sure everyone got followed up with. But again, just IT has been there every step of the way, and we continue to lean on them heavily. Moving on, I wanted to share, you probably caught this, but we have the Family First Corona Relief Act that was signed into law by the President on March 18th. This really provides 2 new forms of leave related to COVID-19. Our employees are eligible for up to 2 weeks or 80 hours of additional sick leave if they qualify. And there's a rubric of reasons of why you can qualify if you or your family may have been impacted by the virus. There's also up to 10 weeks of expanded family or medical leave. And there's some caps that's a paid leave, but it is limited to 2/3 of the employee's earnings are not to exceed $200. So there are some caps. All this had to be programmed into PeopleSoft. We created 2 new electronic forms so the employees can go in and request this leave. We've had about 14 leave requests to date. So not a huge volume because we continue to pay all of our regular employees through the remainder of the school year, but we could see this grow, and we're prepared for that. So I have to thank Nancy Samuels, our accounting director. She led this work group. We had a great team from HR, the general counsel's office, ERP, which is PeopleSoft, IT, the data programming, and our budget department and our risk and benefit management. So and communications to get the word out to our team, our employees. So a great team effort. The only downside about this I have to share with the board is the cost of this leave is going to hit the district. As a public employer, we're not eligible for the tax credits that may help a private employer offset the cost of this. But anyway, it's a good thing for our employees, and we've got that in place. Moving on with the next slide, please. I just wanted to assure the board that we still have our usual annual budget process. We're going to have to do our workshops, obviously, virtually now. You'll have your first one May 20th, but we still have the state truth and millage calendar to satisfy that we must abide by to hold public hearings this summer. And we've got a lot of work to do between now and September 9th when you'll be asked to adopt the final budget. I'd like to move on to the next slide and just share some thoughts around the budget, because I know everyone's probably a little anxious about the budget, just as I am. And I'm doing all the research possible. I'm part of a weekly CFO call of the State Finance Council, which is 18 CFOs across the state that I've been on for years. And just recently this week, we started a CFO conference call with the Council of Great State Schools that'll be getting together once a week virtually as well. We don't have a lot of information right now. There's different theories on what the legislature may do. You know, they approved their budget on March 19th, but it's yet to be signed by the governor. We've heard theories that the governor may use his veto power to try to balance the budget, or probably more realistically, given the magnitude of this crisis, I suspect that at some point the legislature will have to reconvene for a special session. Now, right now, they don't have a lot of information to go on. They're waiting for really the March and the April sales tax collections to come in that will give them a better gauge. And then they're going to have to make some assumptions around the severity and the duration of this impact to our state's economy. But we know it's significant and it may likely be severe. And our experience with the Great Recession tells us, because our state is so heavily dependent on sales tax, unfortunately, that will probably impact education. I know the state has some level of reserves, just as our district does. And so we'll be working through those issues. I do want to share that one of the first things the superintendent did was on March 23rd, we put a comprehensive freeze on all spending and hiring. And there's a waiver process in place to deal with exceptions, but we are doing everything we can to conserve our resources and save money for the remainder of this year, because we know we've got budget challenges ahead and we have unforeseen expenses ahead. You know, if we're buying masks or other items to help deal with the reopening, those things are all going to have a cost to them. So, you know, bear with us. We are working hard, and we hope to bring you more information on May 20th, and we'll start working through those issues. And, you know, we're bound to develop a balanced budget, and we will get that done. So with that, I'd open it up for any questions.
Mr. Burke, it seems like we talk about the reserve every year, but we never touch it. I guess the reserve is there for something like this, so that there will be an opportunity or maybe a need to dip into those reserves if we have to spend millions of dollars on masks and other items this year. I mean, are we going to be, where are we currently on a reserve percentage? What percentage of the budget are our reserves at this point?
So the board has their board contingency reserve that's based on your policy of 3% of the budget. That's at $64 million. And then there's, you know, we are trying to conserve resources. I would like to do everything we can to try to address any challenges without having to take that action to hit the contingency reserve. But, you know, if there was ever a rainy day, this might be the time where we have to consider that. You know, we also want to look at ways to reduce our expenditures on a recurring basis, because we don't know how really long this could impact us. You know, we're fortunate that for FY20, most of our money has already been received through our local property taxes, and actually the states transmitted most of the FEFP of their portion of our funding for this year. So we're able to pay all of our employees for the remainder of this school year. But FY21, definite impact, and potentially into FY22 as well. So I think the board's going to have to be really cautious not to depend too heavily on your reserves in the immediate future, and be judicious about how we balance that, maybe touching some level of reserves and also making some of those difficult decisions just to reduce our ongoing operating costs.
All right, thank you. Any board members have any questions? Mr. Shaw?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Barbieri. Mr. Burke, yesterday we had a conversation. Can you also share with us related to these costs, what kind of savings have we experienced as a result of the current shutdown, and how can those dollars, because those would be non-recurring expenses that could address some of that question?
Yes, sir. And this is something the superintendent has also asked me to work on, so I can give you an answer. We are saving money. Our buses are not running, so we're saving diesel fuel. Our utilities have gone down because we're running the air conditioner at a minimal level just to keep the humidity out. And my best estimate, when I go through all that, there are some areas where we're losing revenue, though. Interest revenue is going to drop a little bit. Some of our Medicaid claiming is going to drop. Our school-age child care programs are no longer collecting parent fees. But when the final analysis, when you net all that out, my best estimate right now is about $13.8 million. I would ask the board to cut me some slack, and I'd like to give it really a range of say 10 to 15 million, and hopefully we'll come in a little better, but we are monitoring that daily. And so, $10 to $15 million will be a nice little significant boost that may help pay for some of those one-time costs we could see in the fall, whether it's hand sanitizer or mask or what have you, or thermometers. So again, and I attribute, the hiring freeze is also helping to save money. We're getting by. We're not using day-to-day substitute teachers any longer. So there's a full analysis, and I'll share that with the board on May 20th in more detail, but we're watching that very closely.
Go ahead. I couldn't get my microphone to come back on. Mrs. Andrews, I saw you next. Mr. Shaw, did you have a follow-up? No? Mrs. Andrews and then Mrs. Whitfield, I believe. Mrs. Whitfield and Dr. Robbins. Go ahead, Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And I would love to thank all of our many supporters. Many of them have given us a lot of funding. The Education Foundation, some individuals have given us money. Is there any way we can know a little bit about it? Because I know we got an abundance of computers that came through the Educational Foundation. Is there any way for us to actually get some information about how that money was spent, where did it go, and how many schools actually benefited from technology or other areas based on their giving, their generous giving?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. Those devices that we continue to distribute many of them are now funded through some of those generous donations. IT's kept a whole record of that. We've had both devices given to us to hand out, as well as cash or check donations where we in turn are buying devices. But it's been significant, and there's been hundreds of devices deployed, and it's just been nice to see that has been a great help and worked very well. So the Ed Foundation continues to impress me with their efforts. James has really beat the bushes, I think, to get people excited to help us and get the checks in. And as soon as we get the money, we place the orders. Now, we've been successful to date, but there is some challenge. Chromebooks is one of those hot items now there was a disruption in the supply chain. So we're able to kind of get them, but we'll probably have a bigger order going into next year that we need to get placed relatively soon to make sure we get them in time.
Just to follow up, Mr. Barbieri.
Go ahead, Ms. Sanders.
Yes, I would like that, because many of us are interfacing on different kinds of remote calls with these individuals from our communities. So with this list, we can personally thank them, and share with them our gratitude for what they're doing for our children.
I agree, and I think it'd be worthy of a board presentation at some point where we try to give credit.
Mrs. Whitfield, I believe you're next. Dr. Robinson, when I said your name, you shook your head no. So if you're not. Okay, Mrs. Whitfield, then Dr. Robinson.
Mine really briefly. I just wanted to ask what the impact of handing out 63,000 computers is on the budget. Is that something you're starting to think about? If we have to replace those in the future, I'm assuming they're going to be somewhat used over this time.
Yes. So these devices, the Chromebooks we buy are about $300 each. So 60,000 is about $18 million worth of devices sitting out there. We hope to bring them back, just like we bring back textbooks each year. And, we can make provisions to have those devices sanitized as well. I'm realistic in that we probably will not, they may not all come back, or they may not all be in working order. We'll have to work through that. But But those were devices that we had on hand already within the district. So the next challenge will be buying new devices to potentially backfill some of the ones lost. And then also this experience of going to digital learning or online learning, really, I think is going to probably put the pressure on us to expedite our movement to a one-to-one device program. And unfortunately, the capital budget does have some challenges and limitations, but we may have to reset our priorities around the capital budget this year to buy more devices. And that's going to probably wind up with some choices. You know, it's tough when you look at the capital budget because you're talking about computers versus maintenance or HVAC work. They're all things that really we need to do, but we're going to bring some recommendations forward with our best thinking to address the most pressing priorities first.
Mr. Superintendent, before Dr. Robinson, did you want to make a comment?
Yes. So we, to Ms. Andrews' point, all of those wonderful donations from the Ed Foundation, the Economic Council, a lot of private individuals, we have been acknowledging in the letter. I think it would be a good idea to put a board item so that the board can acknowledge all of those people individually. I think it's also important to recognize that Mike has we all have a huge job, but we're also trying to figure out this budget and prepare for the reality of hurricane season as well, which is, I know people don't want to talk about that, but that's a reality for us as well, is how we prepare for that. I think it's also important, I think to Ms. Whitfield's point, the IT team under Mike is so amazing. We're actually able to track where all of our devices are in the county. We can they can pull up software and they know where all of these machines are. So, you know, it's amazing what we've been able to do in short order. So I just wanted to add that as part of Mike's presentation.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad Mrs. Andrews brought that up because we should thank people. I have a tendency to overlook that little detail. So thanks for bringing that up. But what I wanted to say before we start spending the money that's been saved or dipping into the reserve is we have to have a plan. And I know that this is probably in some of these work groups, right? But before we start taking any action as a board, we need to discuss the plan. What does school look like? What's the structure of our school system for the delivery of educational services at the other side of this crisis, right? Because this is an opportunity to improve what we've been doing, to make sure that we are, with all intentionality, meeting the needs of the children and adults whose needs we haven't been meeting. So I don't want us to start whittling away at whichever source of funding unless it's an emergency, of course, but until we have a plan. And I think now is the time. And so I guess maybe I'm looking for reassurance from the superintendent that you have a work group that is looking at a new and improved delivery model.
Yes, ma'am, we do. And we do have a work group working on that. I think that was the other reason why we worked so hard up until this point to have a successful board meeting, because we're going to have to be in this together to talk about whatever future expenditures are. So Mike and I have been meeting privately and we'll continue to meet one-on-one with our legislators and the different resources that we have. But you're absolutely right. Before we start writing big checks, we have to talk as a team. And so we have a team working on that, and we will try our best to continue to update the board on our plans. But also, I think even though right now we've scheduled board meetings through May, I think into June, if we need to bring workshops on in between, if we get through this meeting successful, then we know we have a platform that allows us to conduct that business.
I'd just like to share a couple more thoughts before, if we're done with my questions. But there has been some federal stimulus, the CARES Act, that has provided some federal funding for K-12 schools. There's $13.5 billion. Our share of that in Palm Beach County, we expect to be about $37.5 million. So that'll be one source to probably use to help backfill some of the state budget reductions. There's a smaller pot of money that the district may get a share of to help address the COVID-19 slide and some of those things. And we hope to get a share of that. But my bigger point is that while $13.5 billion sounds like a lot of money, those of you that went through the Great Recession with us and may recall the ERA funding, That provided $100 billion for K-12 schools. And Palm Beach's share of that money was over $200 million. The Council of Great State Schools has recently put some letters together to try to start raising awareness and some outreach for more K-12 money in the next rounds of stimulus. And I really think that's going to be essential to our success and our survival to some extent, that more money is put behind that effort for K-12 schools. The immediate impact to the economy is unprecedented, and then the duration kind of remains a little bit of a mystery. But yeah, I'm really thinking that should be one of our priorities too, that we start pushing and looking for some relief at the federal level. And I think that if there's no more questions, that would wrap up the finances for now.
Mr. Superintendent, one question for you. So, and follow up to Dr. Robinson, you and I have had some brief discussions on this, but I think we all probably realize that come fall, if this thing is not really under control, that we're going to have quite a few parents who are going to say, I'm not sending my kid back to the classroom. I want to keep my computer at home. And so I hope your work group is looking at how we do a blended model, because I don't know how a teacher can teach kids in her classroom as well as teach kids that are not in her classroom that should have been in her classroom, but the parents don't want to send them. So we need to be prepared for that, because it's I don't think you have to be a fortune teller to try and figure out that might very well happen if parents are concerned about sending their kids back into the classroom. So,
yes, sir. So, it may have been about 2 weeks ago when I woke up in the middle of the night and realized that this thing may be real, where we have some sort of hybrid or blended model on August. And so Mr. Oswald and Dr. Sheffield have begun that work. There will be multiple workshops for the board as we start to work through that plan. I think the hardest part for all of us, and I think everyone on this call, on this meeting, realizes this, that information changes almost every day. And so as we get the planning, and once we close out the school year and we start working on the summer in the fall, a lot of it is going to be predicated on the whole social distancing thing. So yes, we're working on it, but I want to be clear that those plans probably won't be solid until the first day we show up, because of just all the different information that's coming at us. But yes, we are working on that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mrs. Andrews, and then Dr. Roberts.
And thank you. As we continue for the remainder of this year, as well as what's going to happen for our return,